Most people think ignoring someone is weakness. It isn't. In fact, if you've ever responded to someone who disrespected you, argued with someone who wasn't worth your breath, or reached out to someone who was pulling away, you've already discovered a brutal truth. Reaction is not power. Reaction is surrender. And the people who understand this, truly understand it, operate by a completely different set of rules than everyone around them. This is exactly what Machiavelli warned about long before modern psychology ever gave it a name. Most people remember him as a manipulator. He wasn't. He was a precise observer of human nature. And what he observed, above everything else, was this: the man who controls. His responses controls everything around him. Imagine this. Someone disrespects you, in public, in front of others. Your instinct fires immediately. Defend yourself, correct the record, strike back. So you respond, you explain, you argue your case with precision and conviction. And here's the disturbing part. The moment you do, you've handed them exactly what they wanted, not a fight, leverage, because now they know something about you they didn't know before, that you can be moved, that you can be provoked, and whoever makes you react controls you. This is the first lesson powerful people learn the hard way. Attention is currency. Every time you respond to someone who doesn't deserve it, you are spending from your own account and depositing directly into theirs. Silence is not the absence of a response. It is a deliberate withdrawal of something they desperately need. Like trying to start a fire without oxygen, your silence starves their provocation of the fuel it needs to survive. They escalate. You stay still. And power shifts, invisibly, completely. This leads to the first psychological insight. Why does ignoring someone feel so unnatural? Why does every instinct in your body demand that you respond, correct, defend? Because the human brain is hardwired for reciprocity. When someone provokes you, your nervous system registers it as a threat, and threats demand resolution. This is not weakness, it is biology. But here is where most people stop thinking. They allow biology to make strategic decisions. And biology has no interest in your power. It cares only about immediate relief. The person who has learned to pause between stimulus and response, who can feel the full weight of provocation and still choose stillness, has developed something that cannot be faked, purchased, or performed. Genuine psychological control. This is where most men make a fatal mistake. They assume that responding proves strength. They assume that silence is submission, that ignoring someone signals fear, that defending yourself is required for self-respect. Here's the uncomfortable truth no one tells you. Responding to every provocation does not make you powerful. It makes you predictable. And predictable people are controllable people. Every time you react, you hand your opponent a precise map of your psychology. You show them what disturbs you, what threatens you, what is capable of pulling you off your axis. And now they have something far more dangerous than an argument. They have a manual, not for their behavior, for yours. The silent person reveals nothing. The reactive person reveals everything. It is not that the controlled person feels nothing. They feel the provocation more acutely than most. They simply refuse to let their face, their voice, or their actions become a confession. But this creates a deeper problem. Because if silence is power, why do we instinctively distrust it? Why does the person who doesn't react make us uncomfortable? Why do we assume something must be wrong with someone who refuses to engage? Who taught us that reaction equals engagement? Who taught us that stillness is passive, that the person who does not argue must have nothing worth saying? And more importantly, who benefits when you react? Why? Pause. Ask yourself one question. Every time you have defended yourself to someone who had already decided, every time you explained yourself to someone who never intended to understand, did it change anything, or did it simply cost you? And this leads to the second insight. Think about the most powerful individuals you've ever encountered. They rarely justify themselves. They don't scramble to correct misperceptions. They don't chase the approval of people who were never qualified to give it. They do something far more subtle. They allow silence to work on the other person's mind. Because here is what most people misunderstand about ignoring. It is not passive. It is deeply, deliberately active. When you choose not to respond, you force the other person to sit inside the discomfort of their own provocation. They expected resistance. They prepared for a fight. Instead, they receive nothing. And nothing is often the most destabilizing response of all, like pressing against a door that suddenly isn't there. The expected resistance never comes, and they stumble forward into the void of their own aggression. They begin to fill the silence themselves, with doubt, with anxiety, with over-explanation. You have not spoken a single word, and yet you are controlling the entire dynamic. They don't adapt, they escalate. And every escalation confirms what you already knew. You hold the position of power, not because you fought for it, because you refused to surrender it. But there's a darker layer to this. Ignoring someone is not always clean. It requires you to sit inside the discomfort of being misread, of being seen as cold, of watching someone build an entire narrative around you, one you could dismantle with a single sentence, and choosing not to. This is where most people break. They cannot tolerate being misunderstood. They cannot stand the possibility that someone, somewhere, holds a false version of them in their mind. So they speak. They explain. They present their case to people who were never qualified to judge it. Here's the reality. In doing so, they trade the one thing no one can take from them: their silence, their composure, their refusal to be read. And yet they wonder why nothing changes. And finally, perhaps the most uncomfortable truth of all, sometimes the person you need to ignore is not an enemy. It is someone you care about. And choosing your sovereignty over your impulse to fix, to reconnect, to explain, is the hardest form of self-discipline there is. But this is precisely what separates those who understand power from those who merely speak of it. Power is not what you do when it costs you nothing. It is what you choose when every part of you is screaming to react, and you choose stillness anyway. So the next time you feel the urge to respond, to defend, to explain yourself to someone who has not earned that access, pause. Ask yourself one question. Am I protecting my dignity, or am I simply proving that I can be moved? Because once you see the difference, you stop playing their game and start controlling your own.